All right, so we're going to continue on today with exercise 224, which if you did what I suggested for exercise 223, you're really well equipped for exercise 224 because it's really only a matter of changing the kind of environment settings to get it to go from daytime interior to nighttime interior. So there's not that much of a big change that's going to happen. If you haven't done the daytime interior rendering, you might want to start with the daytime interior rendering and then move into the night rendering. So as we begin with the night rendering, this is a point where we kind of fork the work. And we've been doing everything with a bunch of V-Ray settings for the daytime renderings. And you have two different options of kind of where you go from here. You can save the VisOpt file that represents all of your daytime settings and then subsequently reload it if you want to do a daytime rendering. I've found that sometimes it's easier to just do a save as. Remember, all of your work in the scene is if you set it up the way I suggested, is in blocks. So you can go back and continue to update your building and then drop it in, and it will update in both a day scene and a night scene, whether it's interior or exterior. So to me, it makes sense to fork and now have two files. One is for night, one is for day. But again, it's up to you and kind of how you want to structure your life. But that would be my recommendation. So I've opened my 205 site file that is my daytime, and I've done a save as, renamed it so it's now 205 site night spring 2016. And so now when I start to make the settings, this is going to be the file that's always going to be my nighttime renderings. So once I make these setting changes, it's going to stick kind of with this particular file. So a couple things that are important as we move forward. The first thing is that we're going to have to change the nighttime HDRI environment, because obviously if we do a rendering right now and we see out and we see the daytime background, it's not going to work. So I have on the course website available to you a nighttime HDRI. If you downloaded the HDRI packages, there should be a folder on your flash drive already that is the nighttime set. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my V-Ray options. I'm going to go into environment, and I'm going to change both the GI skylight and the GI background to be the nighttime settings. So I'll click on the map here, and instead of using the Malibu background, I'm going to change my file, and I'm going to go into the night HDRIs, and I'm going to go to the moonlight or the moonlit, and this I'm doing the regular version right now. I'll go ahead and open, and if we look at the preview, right, it's kind of a bluish, blackish color with some clouds and a little bit of sun. If we actually looked at the HDRI, if I opened it in Photoshop, it's not that impressive, but it ends up doing a pretty good job in the renderings. So let me go ahead and open it so you can see it. Of course not. Right? There we go. So if we look at it, it doesn't look all that spectacular because it looks very blue. But once you translate it into the scene and you start having the correct exposure and stuff, it gets much darker. And it's kind of a cloudy sky with a little tiny moon. Ends up looking pretty good. So anyway, I just wanted you guys to see what that was and kind of how it plays out over time. So I have that loaded as my background. Notice that it is same kind of a UVW general environment, which is what I want it to be. I'm not going to worry about the rotation for this. Technically speaking, if I wanted to get really accurate, I would do the same thing that I did for the daytime, match up the sun with the HDRI or vice versa, but I'd have the sun very low powered so that I'd have some moonlight shining in the scene. It's probably too much to do for the interior, and it's definitely too much to do for the interior. It's probably too much to do for the exterior to have those little bit of shadows. We might as well just turn the sun off altogether. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave that and not worry about the rotation at all, and I'll say OK. And I'll make sure that I adjust the skylight background as well to be the night HDRI. And it's the one that's -GI. Go ahead and say OK. If we were to preview it, we get the blurry version of it. It is under the general environment, so we'll go ahead and say OK. And now that's been set, right? The reflection or refraction background should probably be at 1.0 again. So those two are basically reset. Now I have to think a little bit about my camera. And the chances are that this is going to have to drop a bit because I'm going to have a lot less light in the scene. So I'm going to drop this to maybe 50 because it's a nighttime setting. If it ends up being too bright, I'll bump that back up. So the physical camera has changed to 50. I've changed my background environment. My lights are already on in the scene because I had them on in the last scene, so I shouldn't have to change anything with those. And at this point, I should be pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and close my V-Ray options. Oh, excuse me. Let me go back and let me adjust my output to be much smaller. So we'll say a width of maybe 300. And we'll do a quick render. Let me also turn off my distributed rendering. And then we'll go ahead and render. And we'll have a look and see how this turns out. I'm guessing my exposure is too low. I have too much light in the scene based on how bright these are. But we'll let it finish and just have a look when it's done, which means I have to adjust the physical camera. Oh, I failed at one other thing, and that was I needed to turn the sun off. So I'm getting these highlights on the floor. So let's go back. Under Layers, I have two options at this point. I can select the sun itself. So I can select Objects, which is going to select the one directional light. No, somehow it looks like I have that. You just select the sun. There it is. And I can go into my light properties, and I can modify it such that the intensity, wherever it is, right there, I could go to maybe 0.1 or 0.01, thereby leaving it on and having a little bit of light in the scene. Or I could just check the box and disable it altogether. Or I could take it one step further and just turn the layer off altogether. But it looks like I have some other stuff on my sun layer, so it's being problematic. Okay, so I've gone in, I've gone to my sun, I've disabled it, and I've also set the intensity down. Let me go back to my interior one view. So set view, interior, and let's try that render again. And so it's always hard when I'm doing these live examples because you guys have to wait for the little bit of render feedback. But that's the nature of doing this kind of work, where we have to do these little renders and we have to see is it going to turn out the way we want it to. All right, so there we're getting enough of the scene now. So I can see a little bit more out these windows than you can on the projector. It's still a little bit light, so I would argue that this is dusk after the sun's gone down, but not fully like pitch black midnight, 2 in the morning dark for this guy. I can adjust that setting and get it a little bit darker if I want to by going back to my HDRI settings. But it's reasonable. Furthermore, the overall exposure of the scene and the lighting, which I was worried it was going to be too bright, is not bad. It's still maybe a little bit light. So given what I'm seeing right now, I might make a few small adjustments. Let me go to my options. Let me go back to my camera, and we'll bump this up maybe to 100. So it's a little bit less light in the camera. If I go to, I know, technically 125, but it doesn't matter. I might drop this background down a little bit more. We'll go to maybe 0.75, so it's a little bit darker. And after I've done those settings, I'll do another render and kind of test it. Okay? So at this point, you guys don't have to keep sitting and watching me do it. You see what I actually did today was relatively simple because I already did so much work in the last exercise. So what you're doing today is either going to be really simple because you're just changing the background settings to get the night render, or you're going to spend a lot of time inserting the lights, very much like I did last time, getting your scene ready, etc. So at this point in the semester, given where we are, on Wednesday we're going to be doing an exterior night render. You can kind of see how this chain goes through, right? And then after that we're going to start moving into doing the sections and the elevations and the line drawings and that sort of part of it. So really by the end of Wednesday or by the end of this coming weekend, so we'll say before next Monday's class, which is April 30th, I think. If I don't have my calendar in front of me, somewhere in that ballpark. You really next Monday. It's the 2nd. Okay, so May 2nd. Okay, at that point, we're getting to the point where you really need to be done with all of your modeling. Okay, so a variety of you are in different places in your modeling process. That's kind of the end of modeling because you're going to be concentrating on getting good quality line drawings and whatever. And if you're done with your modeling prior to next Monday, when we start doing things like plans and sections of your building, you'll be able to use those as part of your final rather than having to go back and do it on your own time. So it's really, really going to be beneficial for you to be at the point where you're, quote, done with your modeling. Okay? You can obviously still be making tweaks and that sort of thing, but the bulk of it should be done. And so I'm kind of giving you that warning as this is kind of where you should be going. Notice also that the way I have the semester set up, this is about 3 weeks before the final is actually due. And that also means that when all your other classes come down on you with all their stuff due, you should be pretty much done with the stuff you need for this class other than showing up here and doing your work while you're in class. Right? So I'm trying to make your life easy. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? Right? So get it done now, and your life will be a lot easier, at least from my standpoint, as it goes into the end and finals. Remember, the final is on May 23rd, which is the Monday. So we don't have much time left. And so this is kind of my warning shot across the bow. Finish now, and then we can start concentrating on the other pieces of the puzzle. Okay? Are there any kind of questions about what I did? It's rather simple. It's using everything that we've already talked about. It's just changing some settings. And so those settings are changed, and then we do the nighttime rendering. And I'll let this one go, and you guys can see it once it's done at kind of a larger resolution. All right.